Hello everyone, it's Redstone here, and I'm just going to finish up a few things here with another subway system here on Zero before I go on to what I was going to do today. Now, one of the things that I've been kind of kicking myself over not really keeping up on is the other series. Well, can't really say other series because I haven't really kept up on any of them, but mostly I haven't been keeping up with the Let's Play on Outpost 2 because I just have not had the time. And whenever I am recording something, it just happens that I'm already playing when I have the time, so figure might as well do with what I'm doing, you know. Anyway, what I plan on doing today is doing a little bit more of the redstone for mazes. I'm going to be using something that is already existent here on zero.miner.org to show you because it is something that's very useful. And it's something that you may have seen if you watched the random chat videos that I had with Yurok. It's something that we both worked on, and it's actually something that's very useful. I already said that, but I'm going to say it again. It's extremely useful. Anyway, I'll see you guys there after I finish up my little work at this hub station to try to make everything look better. Okay, and we're back. Now you may have seen something like this before in other videos. A simple, what do you call it? 5-light display that gives you the typical digital display for clocks and things. And it is very useful. You could use it as timers, you could use it as message boards, you can use it as anything. The main problem that I've had with the ones that I've seen online before is that the circuitry is overly complex, you know. It doesn't need to be nearly as complicated as people make it. Now, to control the lights themselves, I have this simple circuit right here. Oh, hi CAD. And it's, oh, what was I saying? I got a little bit distracted there. Very simple circuit here. Get the input coming from below. And we'll talk about the red later, but we're focusing on the blue. This green part is where this information for the circuit comes up. It passes through the bottom, and everywhere that you see a redstone torch on this layer is a number, or in some cases a letter, that has that particular light. So this bottom one here controls this bottom light here. Now, I can't really go through what each one of those do with you because this particular circuit is broken. It's for this whole area that I'm in right now is a test area that Yerok 424 and I have for our cooperative build maze. It's one that's been in the works for a very long time and we have not finished it yet. Going more on how this works. So signal goes up the usual way, as you can see with the redstone torches. Anywhere where the default state is on, a redstone torch is used to invert the signal. Anywhere where the default is off, a repeater is used. And one of the things that when he originally built the circuit, he had huge gaps, and I noticed that there was a lot of room for compressing, so I went ahead and showed him this. And once again, he was a little bit frustrated with me, but oh well. And let's see, what was I going to say? I gotta try to think here a little bit. I never do any kind of preparation when I do videos. I just talk off the top of my head, which is great for trying to practice that, but not very good for trying to fill up the time with actual words instead of a whole bunch of rambling like this. Okay, so input. Now what we used here, this is a circuit that we use in the subway system. Slightly modified. It doesn't really need this top part. I don't know why I left that in. So go ahead and remove it. Let's see, needs that, doesn't need that, but I'll leave it in anyway. Yeah, I don't know why I'm doing this right now, but I am. Just to show you. Ooh. Ugh. Anyway. This is not really needed, but it kind of helps us out, keep track of everything. You could just use a piston tape like we have here. However, it doesn't always work. As you can see, there's glass all over the place. I have to work out the bugs with that. But you use a piston tape to send the signal through. And it goes up the tower, yeah. Let's see. The digital display, like I said, you could use it as a timer if you're very careful with the timing and everything. You could use it to display a message that people have to read. And this is going to be edited a lot because I am drawing blanks like crazy. One of the things that we added here was something specific to the maze, where as you can see, there's this line of redstone torches where we use a certain pattern of them to represent the number that's being displayed, and that's how you figure out the last digit to unlock the thing. But if we take a slight variation from that, this was actually something that I've been trying to figure out how to build since pistons were added before we had the lamps. If you don't know me, well, if you haven't talked to me very much on here, or at all, you wouldn't know this, but I am a huge fan of the Myst series. I started playing it with my dad when I was a little kid, and I was really hooked on it from the beginning. I'm very into those puzzle adventure games. And so I wanted to take something from Myst 3 Exile to build, and can't really see it right now because of how dark it is down there. Let's see if I can light it up a bit. Probably turn one of them off, but that's okay. And this is just the first iteration of this particular circuit. But the whole point of showing you this particular one is to prove concept that it doesn't just have to be numbers and stuff like that. It can also be symbols. Now this first iteration isn't very good because you have the glass in the way and it kind of ruins your view of it. But if you played Exile at all, you'll recognize that as the Narayan light symbol base model, or whatever you want to call it. Not quite sure how to call it. And that took a lot of extra wiring that you don't really... I'm not going to go over this particular circuit because I have an improved version over here, where the light is in the ceiling instead of the floor. And also the pathways to the lights with the redstone is a lot clearer, so it's not just random around. Every button actually is the same on each side. And because this is going to be in a maze, I'm not going to show you any solutions or anything to them. I'm not going to show you any of the symbols. If you played Exile, then you're familiar with some of the symbols. If you haven't, well, oh well. Now, with the maze, I have this sign here. I made a quick shortcut to a reference sheet of the symbols that I found on DeviantArt. So if I ever get a chance to, I'll thank that person and tell them that I'm using it as a reference. If not, well, I just won't tell them at all. But you get the general idea here. You have to move around a little bit to see the whole thing, but that's okay because you actually have freedom of movement throughout this whole area, because I have little hints to which symbol to use at any one time on the outside of it. And I'll go ahead and reset that. So let's go over a little bit of how this one works. Now in the center, there's center areas surrounded by the buttons, and I use a very... oh geez, I'm not quite sure how to describe this. I saw it on Ethos channel before, and I thought it was a lot better for this particular use than the other T flip-flop that I've used. It creates a single pulse monostable circuit with this. You know, the power comes on, the piston goes up, and only one tick comes through this repeater. And if you've watched his videos, you know that when the single tick reaches this piston, it goes out and retracts too fast to pull the block back with it, because pistons have been changed to a 2-tick delay rather than a 1-tick delay. So it works as a single piston T flip-flop. And this is another little trick that I learned from his videos. I did not know that this happens. If you use half slabs going up, you can send the redstone signal up in a 2x1 tower. Man, I gotta work on my inflection when I'm talking. But as you can see, it just goes up here. And I have it branching off onto this. I'll talk about that in a moment. But it continues up along its way, and it goes on top of the lights. Now, this is where I was having the problem with the pistons in the past. Before we had the redstone lamps, I was trying to use pistons to block off the light. But I could never figure out how to get a piston positioned just right to where every single signal that had to go to it could go to it. For example, this point right here has 4 different signals coming to it. And the only way that you can get 4 signals to go to it that I could think of without having a whole bunch of a mess of redstone. I mean, I tried it once and it just crossed over into each other's signal all the time, and it was impossible to separate, but you'd have to have it right on top of the lamp, which of course makes it so you can't see it. It becomes even more of a problem when you get to something like the center point here, which has 6, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points that need to hit it. And with a piston, that makes, well, in the center in particular, pistons are impossible. And you go to get a piston to line up to this one, you can't get one to there without going here. And just going to those 4 corners, you would end up blocking off any chance of blocking off this particular one. Now, I normally do not use wool to separate out things. I did that for convenience because I was showing this to Yerok so he could follow it as well. And I have to say that I'm going to start doing this because it actually made it a lot easier to troubleshoot. And I had a few issues where lights weren't coming on or weren't going off, and it was a bit of a nightmare. But moving back down to this right here, this is a vertical X. Is it XOR or XNOR? I always get the two confused. It's either an XOR or an XNOR gate, and I was trying like crazy to design one myself that would take inputs on top and output to the bottom. Finally, I gave up on it because I am not very good at designing the logic gates. However, I did find this one. I can't for the life of me figure out who created it. I just did a Google image search for vertical XOR gate, and this came up. It took me a little while to figure out how to work it as an XOR, but it works. Now what it does is it takes the signal that branches off from the button inputs. Since it's a T flip-flop, it stays on or it stays off. And it brings the signal into here. In the off state, these are both lit, so that's lit and that's off. And that's off, of course. But if input's on, these both go off. That stays off, that stays on, as long as that one is off as well. Brings up the signal, and both of the torches will keep that torch off. Now the other side signal is coming from a piston memory tape, and that's because that's the easiest way to have multiple combinations of things. Oh, excuse me a moment here. Oh. Don't know where that came from. But simple 2-gap piston tape here for memory storage. Now you can do a lot of different things with a display system like this. You can either do a symbol like that, you can do numbers, you can potentially do pictures if you line everything up correctly. But the main thing about this is it's another way of doing a lock. You know, combination locks are pretty boring. You know, you go and find the numbers, you put them in, okay, it's done and over with. But with something like this, you know, it takes a little bit more thought. You could change the, I guess you would call it a combination still, but it's a different picture every time because you use piston tape and it stores multiple of them. The one I have currently here only stores up to 14. I'm trying to remember what the maximum distance that a piston could push in, but you can get an insane amount of different combinations in there. And let's see, you could use different. I'm trying to remember what the type of circuit is called. If it's okay, its purpose is to move a piston tape forward a certain amount based upon which number is selected. I can't think of what that circuit's called for some reason. But you hook that up, and you could potentially set up different combinations for different people. Like they push the button for their name, it moves the memory tapes to the correct position for their combination, and then they input their combination, and if it's correct it opens, if not it doesn't open. And that's just one of those nifty little tricks you can use in anything really. Oof. Oh, I forgot all about this for a moment. Okay. That guy's following me. There. Now he's not. Now I mentioned this in a earlier video. It's a linear forward shift register. And this is actually... This originally was the smallest version of it. But luckily with the introduction of the locking repeaters, I had a little bit of a brain fart there. All of these are data flip-flops, so instead of using that, you can now use a repeater. Well, a set of repeaters. Let's see if I remember how to build this correctly. I figured it out right away when I was first doing it, and I thought it was pretty neat. Let's see. I need a torch and a button. This mouse is really annoying sometimes. Yeah. So if we take this off, so as you can see, it's very simple. When I first heard about the locking repeaters, I noticed that this was going to be possible. And that's a simple data flip-flop. Now, it will only change when the clock input comes through. Now, I'm trying to remember what else. It's also known as a buffer when you know, in one iteration of it, it's a buffer, but what makes this not a buffer is the fact that there's these XOR gates in there. So I'm going to try to mirror this real quick. I'll be right back once I'm done, because after a while the audio on this scrambles, and I do not want to use Audacity. It was causing me a lot of issues with the last video, so I'll be right back once I have that built. Okay, and I'm back. Had a little bit longer than I expected because, well, I need to pee, but anyway, this is the new design. As you can see, it's a lot thinner, a lot shorter. Well, not a lot shorter, but thinner and shorter, just as long though. And as you can see, well, I have to apologize for the random cut there. I was going into editing and I noticed that I went over the time before it starts going staticky. What I was going to tell you there with the end of that was that I put in a random seed into the device there. It worked properly, so I'm happy with that, but what it does is every time you put in a clock signal to the data flip-flops, it progresses one forward. So if you have the very first torch, which was the furthest one away from us, lit, every time you push the button it will go towards you one more. It'll keep on doing that until it reaches the end. Now the main difference between a buffer and a linear forward shift register, which I was going to explain that, I don't know if I did or not because again it went static out, is that with a buffer you're just putting information into some kind of data device. With a linear forward shift register you have these XOR gates that branch off of certain positions on there. They combine together, those positions combine together through the XOR gate, and if they're different then the signal gets passed on to the next XOR gate, and it has 3 of them in there, so it's comparing first the last 2, then the combination of those with the 4th to last, I believe, and then that combination of 3 with one other, and I can't remember which position that is that it compares it to, but that final comparison goes all the way back to the beginning, creating a random on or off position. I don't remember how many iterations it is, but it eventually does come back to the original seed that you put into it. So it's not truly random, it's a pattern, but it's such a large pattern that it is used as a random number because of how large the pattern is. And so that's useful if you want to do random pathways. I personally enjoy putting random pathways in mazes. If you've been on Zero and you've tried Shra or Sri Trasaviran, you'll know that the pathways do change. But with those ones I don't use a pseudo-random, I just use a simple piston memory tape because of size constraints. And those are triggered by people going over pressure plates. So I want to go ahead and give you guys a preview of the next tour of Zero. I'm going to be going over this here and I'll be explaining what it is and explaining its significance to the series. So, hope you guys have a good night. Okay, I have no idea what that's about. Hope you guys have a good evening, night, morning, whatever, and I hope to talk to you next time.